Some new data out just announcing layoffs released. Our senior economics reporter, Steve Leisman, joins us now with more on how much DOGE could be in tomorrow's jobs report. What do you think, Steve?
It's a tricky story here, but first let me tell you, Andrew, announced layoff in February surging by 245% to the highest level since the pandemic, with the Trump administration's efforts to reduce the federal workforce playing not the only, but the biggest part in that. The outplacement firm Challenger Gray Christmas, they're saying that announced February layoffs, not actual layoffs, but announced ones, rose to 172,000, up from just 49,000 in January. It's the highest monthly number since July 2020, the worst February since 2009. It was a mix of layoffs from the government and the private sector, including government at 63,000 announced. That includes federal workers and private government contractors. Retail, 45,000, hit by cold weather, as we know. And tech, 22,000, with HP, Meta, and Workday among the tech giants we know that announced February layoffs. The DOGE impact was the top reason cited for job cuts, followed by market and economic conditions, and then bankruptcy. The bulk of government job cuts are likely too recent to show up in tomorrow's jobs report. Workers won't be counted as unemployed until their severance runs out. But remember, roughly 30,000 federal workers, they leave their jobs monthly in a normal month. So the hiring freeze announced by President Trump on day one of his presidency, that could mean vacated jobs won't be filled. That could create some negative numbers that could drag down the headline number even as soon as tomorrow. Now, Evercore ISI, in a research piece, suggests total job losses from DOGE could be as low as 50 if the government eventually gets back to hiring, or as high as 660,000 in a worst-case scenario created by what it calls DOGE policy uncertainty. They wrote, DOGE-related uncertainty over contracts and grants could have an additional paralyzing effect on hiring at employers exposed to those funding sources or in need of regulatory approvals from agencies that are themselves paralyzed by DOGE review. Now, most forecasters that I'm reading are settling on some kind of midpoint here between total job losses of 250 to 350,000. That's federal job losses, or roughly 20 to 30,000 a month. That would be a noticeable number, but the ultimate economic impact depends on whether the private sector finds jobs for those workers, Andrew, and can make up for those job losses.
Steve, so how many workers are we talking about in terms of who could be affected by the layoffs?
Well, it's pretty extensive, Andrew. For example, there are 3 million federal government workers. We don't know. We heard, for example, Veterans Affairs was one place that was mentioned where they could have it, talking about the IRS. Local government employment is 15 million. Most of those are educational workers. We don't know how the Department of Education changes planned by the Trump administration will change that. 5 million state workers. And then according to Evercore ISI, there are maybe 4 to 5 million workers out there in the overall economy whose jobs are somehow touched by or otherwise affected by federal government contractors.
Right.
Some of those are in defense. There could be cuts there. Some of those are non-defense. There's all kinds of ways the federal government is in the economy. And so it's really hard even to figure out what the universe is. But there may be as many as 20 to 25 million jobs that in some way could be affected by this. Obviously, they're not all going away. Right. But when we know those plans as they come through, and I think this idea of what Evercore calls DOGE policy uncertainty is something that could keep people from hiring until things are more clear.
Well, Steve, we're talking about you're putting it in the context of DOGE uncertainty. I would ask what you think of tariff uncertainty. You know, I was talking to a real estate executive the other day who was saying that they're not building. They're actually not doing construction because they're waiting to find out what's going to happen with the tariffs because of some of the supplies and other things that would be coming in and what the costs are ultimately going to be, and because of that policy uncertainty.
Yeah, that's a separate area of uncertainty, and it sounds like that example came almost directly, by the way. There was a mention of something like that in the Fed's beige book, which mentioned tariffs 49 times and had a lot of issues of uncertainty. Talked about consumers not buying because of tariff uncertainty, businesses not investing because of tariff uncertainty. Look, I don't know how to say this, Andrew, but it doesn't appear as if, assuming that the president has good intentions and good ideas with his tariff policy, it doesn't appear as if it's being implemented in a way that is minimizing uncertainty and perhaps minimizing the economic impact in a way that would be not something. This stuff could show up, Andrew, in the numbers if we do have this holdback in investment from CEOs because of the uncertainty. So it's something to watch, and then maybe down the road they get the deregulation and the tax cuts that helps. But right now,
Steve,
it's uncertainty
real quick, and I know
from the
they're
federal
playing us
government
out, but
side
we
and
talked
uncertainty from the tariff side.
Steve, we talked to Frank Luntz earlier, and he made the argument, and also, by the way, Tom Emmer, who said that the American public effectively voted for free market, the idea of free trade, wanting to get back to some kind of parity with some of these countries that have tariffs on us, and that the American public is going to be willing to pay the price for that, at least in a temporary way. As somebody who has done the work on this, do you think that that's true politically?
I don't know. How much pain we're going to have is a question. I'm amazed, Andrew, at how much the American public seems to be aware of this tariff issue. As a person who's polled for like 20 years on this stuff, you ask some economic questions, people have no idea what's going on. They're aware of this tariff issue. We'll see what happens if prices go up and how people feel about it then.